Catherine, never looking out of place or as anything other than the future Queen of the United Kingdom. She and William have grown and continue to grow into their role as modern senior royals.
What began as a tense evening with the Emir of Qatar unexpectedly shifted when Princess Catherine intervened with a simple gesture that changed the atmosphere. Inside Buckingham Palace, the Great Hall glittered with light and music. Long tables stretched across the room lined with gold plates, tall crystal glasses, and polished silver cutlery that caught the glow of the chandeliers above. Everything looked as grand as it always does when the royal family hosts visiting dignitaries. Yet beneath the glamour, tension quietly simmered. The guest of honor was Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar. At 45, he had already spent more than a decade leading his nation. Those who knew him often described him as calm yet firm, a leader who commanded respect and demanded that Qatar's voice be heard. Just days earlier, he had delivered a powerful speech at the United Nations. Accusing Israel of violence in Gaza, his words had echoed across the world. And that same stern mood seemed to follow him to London. For King Charles, the evening was about far more than food and polite speeches. Britain and Qatar were deeply tied in trade and energy, with Qatar's sovereign wealth fund owning vast stakes in London's skyline, from luxury shops to office towers. Keeping the Emir content was not simply a matter of courtesy, it was about safeguarding trust between two nations. Princess Catherine entered the hall with her characteristic poise. She wore a flowing ivory gown and a diamond tiara once owned by the late Queen, having returned to royal duties earlier that year after completing her cancer treatment. Her presence carried a deeper weight. To many, she had become a symbol of resilience and hope, someone who could remain steady in difficult times. The evening began smoothly. Guests exchanged polite conversation, glasses chimed, and soft music filled the air. But as dinner was served, the Emir's expression betrayed discontent. His seat had been placed several chairs away from the king, next to ministers and officials instead. To most, it might have seemed a minor detail, but in the world of state visits, such placements carry meaning. The Emir leaned back in silence, his face tense, while his aides whispered anxiously beside him. Observers began to take notice. A sense of unease crept into the room. Though the surface chatter continued from across the table, Catherine watched carefully. She had always been praised for her ability to sense discomfort in others. At schools, she spotted shy children before anyone else did. In hospitals, she picked out worried parents trying to hide their stress. Tonight, her instincts told her the Emir was unhappy, and if no one acted, the evening might sour. She waited, never one to rush or draw attention prematurely. When the first toast was raised and glasses lifted across the room, Catherine made her move, turning slightly toward the Emir. She caught his eye and offered a warm smile, not the stiff one often worn in photographs, but a sincere, respectful one. Then she tilted her head gently and raised her glass directly to him. The gesture was small, but its meaning was unmistakable. The Emir paused, holding her gaze. Then, with a nod, he lifted his own glass in return. The tension softened, his face relaxed, and his aides visibly eased. Throughout the meal, Catherine took moments to engage him in light conversation. She avoided politics and business, instead asking about his family. Her questions were warm, showing that she had made the effort to learn what mattered to him personally. Slowly, the Emir began to relax. He spoke proudly of his children, something he rarely did in public, and even allowed himself to smile and laugh. Those around the table felt the shift. What had been a strained, watchful silence transformed into easy conversation. Officials on the British side quietly exhaled with relief by dessert. The Emir leaned forward, speaking animatedly with a senior minister. His earlier frown had disappeared. Praise for the banquet flowed openly from his table, and his aides looked reassured. It was clear to everyone present that Catherine had managed to turn the mood with nothing more than genuine warmth and thoughtful gestures. But she knew her role that night was not finished. State banquets are carefully choreographed, where every word, every look, and every movement carries symbolic weight. Catherine understood that the Emir's earlier displeasure had left a shadow. To fully restore the mood, she needed to do more than offer comfort. She had to show him that both his position and his voice were respected at the highest level. When the speeches began, King Charles spoke first. His words celebrated the friendship between Britain and Qatar, highlighting cooperation and energy, investments in British schools and hospitals, and the close bond between the two royal families. Applause followed as he raised his glass once more. Then it was the Emir's turn. The hall fell silent. His English, delivered in a strong Qatari accent, carried weight. He thanked the king for the welcome, but pressed further, speaking firmly about fairness in global politics, the urgent need for peace in Gaza, and the responsibility of leaders to protect families caught in conflict. His voice was steady, uncompromising, reminder of his reputation for speaking hard truths without retreat. Some of the guests shifted in their seats. Political speeches at a state banquet often felt heavy, but few had expected such pointed words in a hall glittering with gold and silver. Catherine, however, did not look away. Her gaze stayed fixed on the speaker, her head nodding gently in quiet acknowledgement. It was a small gesture, but for a man who longed to be heard, it meant everything. When his speech ended, polite applause filled the room. Catherine sensed the divide. Some clapped out of duty, others with hesitation. She decided to ease the tension. Leaning toward the Emir, she offered a warm smile and said, "Your words remind us all that families, no matter where they live, deserve safety and peace." The remark was brief but thoughtful. The Emir's eyes widened with surprise before softening with appreciation. She had not dismissed or diluted his message. Instead, she had grounded it in a universal truth family, knowing his deep pride as a father. Catherine had struck the right chord. The meal resumed with lighter courses, and the heaviness of his words seemed to lift. Later, during a pause in the music, Catherine joined a smaller circle around the Emir. She steered the conversation away from politics and trade, toward education. She had read about Qatar's ambitious investments in schools and sports, and praised them openly. "It gives young people so much hope," she said, "when they see leaders putting schools and health first." This time, the Emir leaned in with real energy. Education was his pride, and he spoke eagerly about new projects, scholarships, and athletes being trained for international competitions. Catherine listened with care, asking questions that proved she had come prepared. This was not shallow small talk. She had done her homework. Observers noticed how naturally the two connected. It was not charm alone, but genuine respect and knowledge. She showed him that she valued what mattered most to him, beyond rank in politics. Gradually, the Emir's earlier demands for recognition softened into praise. He began speaking warmly of the British royal family to his aides, remarking on Catherine's grace and thoughtfulness. The same man who had seemed ready to storm out in frustration now looked engaged, even pleased. British ministers, who had braced for a diplomatic headache, exchanged looks of relief. Catherine had achieved what seasoned diplomats sometimes failed to do. She had won respect through human connection. The banquet carried on with music, toasts, and ceremonial pleasantries, but the real story of the night had already unfolded. Catherine had walked into a tense moment and, with simple words and small gestures, transformed the atmosphere. Yet the evening still held one more surprise. What she chose to do next would raise the Emir's admiration even higher. Leaving the entire hall astonished, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace had settled, but the evening remained delicate. The Emir, though calmer, still carried the weight of his nation's pride. Catherine understood that one careless glance or misplaced word could undo her efforts. Every look, every pause, every smile mattered. Dinner was served in flawless order, silver trays gliding past, crystal glasses catching the light. Catherine leaned toward the Emir again, keeping his attention. She mentioned his recent visit to Oxford, where he had met Qatari students studying science and medicine. His expression softened with pride. Many of those students held scholarships from his government. Catherine went further, recalling a young Qatari researcher working on renewable energy and noting its connection to Britain's clean technology goals. "It is inspiring," she said warmly, "to see young people lead the way." The Emir gave a genuine laugh, short but unforced, and others nearby noticed the easing in his shoulders. Her strategy was simple, yet powerful. Highlight what he valued, show respect, and draw links that reflected positively on his people. King Charles, seated nearby, observed without interfering. His look alone revealed his approval. He trusted Catherine's steady approach, and it was working. The Emir, once bristling with pride, was now leaning in to listen. Soon the conversation turned to football, a subject dear to the Qatari leader. Qatar had hosted the 2022 FIFA World Cup, and he remained immensely proud of it. Catherine joined carefully, mentioning her children, especially Prince George, who had begun following football more closely. He was very excited watching England during the Euros, she said with a light but respectful tone. The Emir chuckled. And does he support England only? He asked with playful humor. Catherine smiled. He tries to, but sometimes children choose their heroes from everywhere. He has his favorites. It was a simple exchange, but one with weight. By sharing something personal, something human, Catherine broke through the formal walls of a state banquet. For a man who valued family above all, her words resonated deeply. At the far end of the table, other guests carried on their own conversations. But the real center of the evening was clear, the unexpected and genuine. Dialogue between the Princess of Wales and the Emir of Qatar. As the evening progressed, the Emir once again returned to the subject of trade. His earlier frustrations were back, though this time expressed with less sharpness. He spoke of Qatar's desire for fairer treatment in energy contracts. Catherine listened attentively, nodding at the right moments. She did not attempt to argue or resolve the issue directly. Instead, she leaned on the same approach she had used before, pointing to shared values. Your Majesty, she said. Her voice steady and clear, the United Kingdom does not take lightly the strength of its partnerships. It is not only about numbers, it is about the future. We want to build together. The Emir paused and regarded her with fresh eyes. This was more than routine diplomacy. She was showing that his concerns had been acknowledged and respected. Not venturing into promises she had no authority to make. It was a delicate balance, and she carried it well. By the time dessert arrived, the mood had shifted completely. Plates of fruit and tarts were placed before the guests, and the Emir no longer seemed the restless figure he had been earlier. Those nearby began to relax, speaking more freely as music from a string quartet drifted through the room. Catherine leaned back, elegant in posture, and glanced across the hall, taking in how the atmosphere had changed. What might have been an uncomfortable evening for the palace was now becoming a quiet triumph of diplomacy conducted on a personal level. Even the Emir's aides, seated nearby, exchanged looks of surprise. They were well aware of his reputation for firmness, for never yielding an inch in conversation. Yet here he was, laughing openly and conversing with Catherine in good spirits. His demands had not vanished. They still mattered, but the tone had shifted. What once sounded like frustration now came across as respectful dialogue. Catherine had managed to soften not only the Emir's mood, but the atmosphere of the entire banquet. Still, she remained mindful. Banquets were long, and pride could resurface at any time. So she continued with the same calm rhythm. Then, as the evening deepened, the Emir surprised everyone. He sat back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Catherine while the background chatter carried on. For much of the night, she had guided their exchange with patience and composure. Now, at last, he revealed what had been troubling him from the beginning. He cleared his throat and lowered his voice just enough to draw attention from those nearest. Britain has always spoken of partnership, he began, carefully and directly. But sometimes I feel Qatar is asked to give more than it receives. This is not fair. The table grew silent. His words were polite but firm, and they cut to the very heart of the tension that had surfaced earlier in the evening. A few aides shifted uncomfortably, uneasy with his candor. King Charles remained composed but watchful, leaving space for Catherine to reply. She leaned in slightly, her voice even. Your Majesty, I hear what you are saying. It is important that respect works both ways. I believe this evening shows that your voice is valued here. The Emir studied her. He was not accustomed to such direct but respectful words from a royal figure. Most would have sidestepped the issue with vague reassurances. Catherine, however, had acknowledged his concerns without excuses. That alone captured his attention. Breaking the silence, she went further. She reminded him that Britain's ties with Qatar ran deeper than contracts or financial agreements. She spoke of Qatari families who had made London their second home, students attending British schools, and of doctors training in British hospitals. That is more than business, she added gently. That is trust. The Emir's expression softened once again. He leaned forward, his voice now far less sharp. You speak with honesty, Princess. That is rare. Tension dissolved once more. Other guests looked relieved as the conversation eased forward. Catherine had not sidestepped the issue, she had faced it squarely. But with respect, she then steered the discussion toward lighter ground. Asking about his vision for expanding Qatar's cultural presence through museums and art, his face brightened as he described his dream of turning Doha into a global cultural hub. Catherine listened with genuine interest, speaking of her own visits to art galleries with her children, seamlessly linking her family life to his ambitions. The Emir chuckled warmly. You remind me that leaders are also parents. Perhaps that is what the world forgets sometimes. Those nearby smiled, and the once tense mood grew almost cheerful, with laughter breaking through at intervals. What had begun with tension and demands was transforming into a scene of open praise. Later, speeches were given. King Charles spoke thoughtfully about friendship between nations in his measured way. Then came the Emir's turn. The room held its breath, remembering his sharp tone at the start of the night. But this time his words were different. Standing tall, he spoke not of unfair treatment, but of mutual respect. He praised the palace's hospitality, Britain's history, and the warmth he had received that evening. He even turned to Catherine directly, thanking her for her kindness during their exchange. Applause followed. King Charles nodded in quiet approval, but it was Catherine who received the most telling acknowledgement. Guests whispered about how the Princess of Wales had shifted the mood of the entire night, not through speeches or power, but through steady conversation and a human touch. When the speeches ended, the Emir returned to his seat, visibly lighter than when he had first arrived. The sharp edges of his earlier remarks had softened into admiration. His aides, tense for much of the night, finally seemed at ease. Catherine, however, did not bask in the attention. She simply carried on with her quiet composure. Catherine quietly returned to her calm posture, offering a polite smile as she carried on with the meal. Yet everyone in the room understood what had just taken place. The princess had transformed sharp demands into graceful praise. As the music swelled once more and the evening edged toward its close, Catherine knew her night was not yet finished. One final exchange awaited her, an encounter destined to leave. It's marked far beyond the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace. The banquet was nearing its end. Plates were cleared, the music softened, and guests prepared to rise. Earlier, the Emir of Qatar had surprised everyone by shifting his words from criticism to praise. Still, it was Catherine's quiet presence beside him that held the evening together. When the Emir rose to leave, he turned to her with a rare look of gratitude. His aides stood ready to escort him out, yet he hesitated. "Princess," he said softly, "you reminded me tonight why respect is earned, not demanded. For that, I thank you." Catherine lowered her head with a gentle smile and a modest nod. Claiming credit was never her way, but those close enough to hear understood the weight of his words. The Emir had been deeply moved. Then came the moment no one expected. As he reached for his coat, Catherine placed one hand lightly against her chest and extended the other toward him. It was not a formal handshake, but a simple, heartfelt gesture of goodwill. The Emir paused, then mirrored her by placing his hand over his heart. The exchange lasted only seconds, yet silence fell across the hall. Cameras clicked softly in the distance. What might have been remembered as an evening of tension was now transformed. Watching nearby, King Charles allowed himself a small, approving smile. He knew how fragile such moments could be. Catherine had done more than calm a guest. She had strengthened a delicate bond without a single grand word. As the Emir departed, he spoke once more, loud enough for all to hear. "Britain has shown friendship tonight. May this spirit guide our partnership forward." His words echoed warmly, and even those who had worried earlier nodded in agreement. The doors closed, and the atmosphere lifted. Guests began speaking freely, praising Catherine's role. Some admired how she had listened without rushing to respond. Others noted her focus on shared values rather than disagreements. Catherine herself sought no praise. She rejoined Prince William, asked about their children with a soft laugh, and remarked, "George will want to know if it all went well." In that moment, behind the tiara and ceremony, she revealed the heart of a mother who thought first of her family. In the days that followed, the story spread quickly. Photographs of Catherine's shared gesture with the Emir were published worldwide. Commentators praised how a tense evening had been softened not by diplomacy or speeches, but by human connection. Reports from Doha echoed this view, with newspapers commending the Princess of Wales for treating the Emir with genuine respect. For Qataris, it mattered greatly that their leader's dignity had been honored, even far from home. Diplomats also took note. One senior Foreign Office figure remarked, "Sometimes diplomacy takes place in rooms filled with documents, but sometimes it happens in small gestures at a dinner table." That night was the latter. As always, Catherine made no public comment. She simply returned to her work visiting schools and charities as part of her early childhood initiatives. Yet those who had been present at Buckingham Palace would never forget how her steady presence shaped the outcome of a state banquet. It revealed her unique role. She was not elected, nor was she a politician, but she had represented her country with humanity and care. Where others might raise their voices, she had shown the strength of listening and the quiet power of one graceful act. And so the memory of that night endured, not as a tale of conflict, but one of understanding. Guests who had arrived uneasy left with admiration. The Emir, who began the night with demands, departed with respect. And Catherine, who never sought the spotlight, found herself at the very center of it all. The banquet ended under the same golden lights that had illuminated its beginning. Yet, thanks to one princess and one gesture, its memory would shine brighter than anyone had imagined. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions leave the most lasting mark. So, what do you think of Catherine's way of handling the Emir that night? Do you believe such small gestures truly have the power to reshape major events? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Be sure to click on the next video. We promise you'll enjoy it.